Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The actor Ed Skrein has stepped down from a role in the latest remake of the Hellboy cult comic series after he found out the character was originally of mixed Asian heritage. Skrein said neglecting to cast the role in a culturally accurate way would continue a worrying tendency to obscure ethnic minority stories and voices in the arts. The producers welcomed what they called his unselfish decision. But why is the film industry embroiled in yet another outcry about Hollywood whitewashing? Parag O'Brien reports.
A canter through Hollywood's casting of white actors in Asian roles. In the 1965 blockbuster,
The Face of Fu Manchu.
the title role,
Christopher Lee as the merciless Dr. Fu Manchu.
in the Inn of the Sixth Happiness, Robert Donat starred. Kurt Jürgens, the romantic lead.
Would it offend you to be loved by a man of another race?
The question, in hindsight, what were casting directors and eye makeup artists thinking? Before you tut-tut into your popcorn tub, though, some more contemporary, if complicated, examples. The casting of Tilda Swinton as a Tibetan monk, for some, made Doctor Strange stranger.
Maybe next time you can design me better.
The casting of Scarlett Johansson in the Japanese manga classic Ghost in the Shell was also criticised. Which brings us to this man, British actor Ed Skrein, rising star of the action man superhero genre.
They won't disappoint.
Last starred in Deadpool. Last night, he announced he will not now be playing a Japanese-American character in the next Hellboy film. The character, Major Ben Daimio, is from the original comic book series.
Ben Daimio is the field commander for the BPRD, the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defence, which is an organisation in the Mignolaverse, which is a comic book universe created by Mike Mignola that started with Hellboy, but quickly expanded into a huge cast of characters. He is of Japanese descent, so he's Japanese-American.
Okay. And how central is that to the narrative in the comic book?
It's never really a key part of the story. It's much more about his encounters with the paranormal.
After something of an online backlash, Ed Skrein decided not to play the part in the new film. His rationale in a statement last night.
It's clear that representing this character in a culturally accurate way holds significance for people, and that to neglect this responsibility would continue a worrying tendency to obscure ethnic minority stories and voices in the arts. I feel it's important to honour and respect that. Therefore, I've decided to step down so the role can be cast appropriately.
Before Skrein decided to pull out, though, Krista Campbell, an executive producer on the Hellboy film, with this retort to the people complaining about the casting choice.
Someone comes and does a great audition to get the role. Stop projecting your own onto us. We are all one. We don't see colours or race.
A tweet she subsequently deleted.
We're leaving together. Good, cut.
A training workshop for actors today in South London, and universal praise for Skrein's decision. This casting director has worked for, among others, Disney.
If the ethnicity of the character isn't important to the story, then you would consider all ethnicities for that role. And certainly I consider it my responsibility as a casting director to cast colourblind as much as possible.
You could argue that if they were casting blind for this role,
yeah,
you know, it's perfectly acceptable for a white British actor to be in it.
That's very, very true. But I think you have to take into account that we're coming from a place of prejudice. So this is why it's so important now to correct that.
Back at the comic shop, we're shown the Miss Marvel comics, and talk turns to who could play her if it ever reached the big screen. Miss Marvel is an American Pakistani Muslim from New Jersey.
Well, joining me now are the actor Vera Chock, casting director Sasha Robertson, and Aqua Jamfi from the British Blacklist, a database of British black talent. Welcome to you all. Sasha, if I can come to you first, do you think this is a turning point for the industry? Is it a moment where things are really shaken up?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think it's really honourable and brave, actually, of Ed Skrein to have stood down today. And I think the main point is that there's a real lack of opportunity for, you know, a Japanese-American actor probably doesn't get many roles coming. So in this instance, I think it's fairer to push those roles their way. So I hope so. But I mean, it's a complex subject because there are instances where, you know, for the narrative of the story, you need to be a bit more specific. But I hope it is a turning point, yeah.
Well, we'll come to some of the complexities in just a second. Akua, that's executive producer previously saying, we are all one, we don't see colours or race. What do you make of that?
I thought it was a bit ridiculous, and I'm glad she deleted that tweet because the role is an Asian American. It's specific. There are lots of people who've invested in this comic strip story. It's got a cult following, and because there's not much representation, these kind of roles matter. And I think it's done a brilliant thing in stepping down because it's honourable and it's inspiring to people who feel even, you know, are questioning taking control of their career, even taking on roles where they might feel they're compromising themselves, but for the fear of turning down and maybe limiting their success. He's done a good thing to inspire up-and-coming actors that you don't have to always say yes, and you can be, you know, have some integrity and take control of your career and command the kind of roles and how you want to be viewed in the public eye as well. So I'm so glad she deleted that tweet because it was very ignorant.
Vera, how difficult has it been for someone of your background to get work?
It's worked both ways. So I've had a lot of work because of my colour, but I would say that the roles have been stereotypical and demeaning, and I have not always been comfortable playing.
Can you give us an example of something that made you feel uncomfortable?
Well, for example, continually being asked to play the servant, or the prostitute, or the woman who gets killed, or the person that nobody else likes. So there's been a move from just being seen for race-specific roles, but when I get only seen for roles that reinforce racial stereotypes, and if there's only one East Asian person, and that person is looked down on in the story, it's damaging. And I don't really get seen for general roles, but I think some people would argue that I have been, but they don't realise that I'm still playing stereotypes.
Well, a lot of focus today on the casting, obviously, and we'll talk to Sasha about that, but perhaps those roles don't exist, so maybe it's a fault of writers or producers.
Perhaps. I know a lot of writers, and I'm a writer myself, and it is something that if you don't specify everything about the role, then perhaps the right actor isn't going to be matched up to it. But I suppose the thing is that our default thinking is generally white. So a writer of any colour might write fantastic roles, which might suit actors of any colour as well. But because we're thinking in terms of the norm or the status quo, I think we need reminders.
Okay. So, Sasha, when you're casting, would you say it's fair to say your default is always a white actor?
No, I don't think so. But I think there are certain instances where it may be that it dictates that, and it's not. But that really should be, you know, the exception to the rule. And I think we are. I hope, as a profession, we are, you know, moving more and more to being more diverse. Sometimes we can only put the right actors in front of the director and producer, and often it becomes down to a financial decision, or, you know, there's all sorts of other.
But there has been this idea in Hollywood for a long time that only films with white actors sell. Do you think that's now changing?
I really hope that's changing. Yeah, I mean, I think it is changing, but I think it's, you know, I think this will help. These sort of things help a lot. This probably happens quite a lot, but because it's a high-profile actor, we're hearing about it, which is a good thing. But, you know, there are, I mean, you know, I cast a film a couple of years ago called The United Kingdom, which the story was about a black African prince coming to England, falling in love with a white suburban girl. So obviously, in those instances, you're only going to be really able to cast a white Caucasian actress, because otherwise it doesn't fit in with the story. And that's a sort of obvious example, but there are other instances like that. But I think generally we do need to be thinking that it's about the right actor, it's about the ability, it's not about the...
Did you want to come in?
Yes, I mean, I think what I find is that if there is a person of colour in a story, that the writers or the producers or the directors will retrospectively feel that they need to explain why they're there. So if I've been cast as secretary, suddenly the name of the secretary has been changed from Jane Smith to May Wong. And I'm like, why can't my name be Jane? I mean, my name is Vera in real life. And so this is the thing of the deep-rootedness of what is in our brains.
Okay. Akua, if acting and the creative industries is all about suspending reality and playing with the imagination, why does it matter what ethnicity an actor is?
I think it matters when it becomes, when it's historical and when there's such emphasis on the character and why the character, their culture and religion and all those type of things that affect the whole environment, the world that this character is born into or comes from, especially if it's cultural specific, especially if it's racially specific. So because I'm not a massive fan of colourblind casting, blanket colourblind casting, I think there are times when it's absolutely important that you stick to the rules, you stick to the description of the character. And also, because there is such a lack of roles for ethnic actors, there needs to be an even playing field. So when it comes to something where there's a chance to cast diversely, you must, and especially if that character is race-specific, as described in the role, then you have to stick to it. You have to give and take away this thing that it's got to be a name brand actor to get the film to sell, because some films flop. I think Matt Damon's film flopped. So...
Vera, let's say the National Theatre calls you up and says, we are putting on a production of Romeo and Juliet and we want you to play Juliet. Would you say yes?
Absolutely.
Is that not a culturally specific role? Because Juliet was Italian.
So this is a question about reverse racism and whether that's possible. And I would say no, because if we look at racism being a thing to do with prejudice and power, it's to do with power and bullying. So I would say it's not racist to cast me as Juliet because of historical bias. And I know it's a bit tricky. And I've been reading a lot of comments in the newspaper and on social media, sort of with the backlash of, isn't it racist to even consider Idris Elba as James Bond, or why cast Hamilton, white historical figures with people of colour? Because the point is, we're making a point of, we are part of society and we have been historically whitewashed out. And I think we get really emotional and fearful around ideas of if we are compassionate towards other people, that means we're going to be less compassionate to,
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but Vera, Sasha and Akua, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
Krish.
you.
Thanks.